The Antigua Forum 2020 was an amazing experience. This is one of the most incredible gatherings with thought leaders from around the world and powerful projects that all come together to cultivate and create and accelerate new ideas.
We're here with Robyn Metcalfe. She's a food historian, a futurist, an author, a producer, an artist, and she's run across 6 global deserts. We are just a few days outside of the Antigua Forum. We're here on the university campus of Francisco Marroquin. Robyn, this is your second Antigua Forum. How was your experience? How did you get involved in the Antigua Forum, and why did you come back?
We were invited, both my husband and I were invited, in fact, to the first time we came, which was a year ago, by one of the alumni of the forum, and he reached out to us and we came, not really knowing much or anything about the process or what really took place, but we were intrigued by this whole idea of a gathering of people who really coalesced around this idea of free markets and liberty and some of these ideas that are hard to find in terms of a community to discuss things. And it wasn't just sitting there and complaining about the world, it was really focused on doing something about it. So the whole idea of projects, the idea of bringing in some of these principles to bear to solve it was really a unique opportunity. So that's what attracted us, and that's what got us back the second year. So, and it was just as good, if not even better.
So can you tell us a little bit about your project, Food and City, and also how you first got interested in the food supply chain throughout the world?
Well, first of all, supply chains don't sound like the most exciting thing in the world, but they are really exciting. So one of my goals is to make them interesting, because that's where so many of the problems that happen within the food system, that's where the breakdowns happen. So I got interested in it. It actually grew out of a project during the 1990s when I started and founded a farm around conserving endangered breeds of livestock. So I was working with really small populations of these animals in a conservation effort to try to create a market for them so that farmers would raise them again. In doing so, I ran into a breakdown in the supply chain every time I tried to get these animals to a chef, to a market. So that was just a problem. It was really an interesting one. It seemed like it really needed attention. So I went back to school, got a master's, got a PhD around this whole idea of the history of supply chains, how they developed, and how we got to where we are today. So my work, my scholarship is basically on how we feed cities, how basically the movement of food from producers to consumers, which normally inhabit cities.
Can you describe a little bit of your thoughts about the relationship between free markets and entrepreneurship and the history of supply chains and why it's especially interesting and important to food?
It seems to me that the more we can understand the supply chain, the more we can find where those friction points are that really stop the movement of healthy food to the plates, and then we can deploy or interest entrepreneurs in focusing on solving those problems. So for the last 5 years, I ran a startup challenge focused just on solving supply chain problems and those friction points. So that was really fascinating to see how people began to think creatively about storage problems, just for example, or tracking and tracing food through the supply chain. How we feed cities, how do we get a lower carbon footprint from transporting food over long distances. So all of these projects seems ideally designed for entrepreneurs to come in and solve them. So we worked with over 80 of these startups who are now working on it. So I think it's an exciting space, and it's up to us to really define where those opportunities are, I think.
Obviously, health is a basic element of human life and flourishing. But especially in a world where some people are talking about the population size and worrying, where do you think are the most important areas for entrepreneurs to step in and promote both health and human progress and development?
I think one of the most important areas to focus on for entrepreneurs is the whole idea of the carbon footprint idea of it. There's big gains to be made in that. Even finding better fuels for container ships, for example, it's a big gain. Creating sort of an Uberization of transport, so you don't have trucks driving around half empty with perishable food, for example. And then finally at the end, this is going to take a long time to do, but is to really build a blockchain-like system for tracking and tracing food. So I think that it's such a rich area for entrepreneurship.
Do you have any advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, especially younger people getting interested in the intersection of food and entrepreneurship? The things you think are most important?
Avoid the sort of polarized conversation that goes on about food right now. There are a lot more people talking about food, but it's either or meat, no meat, local, not local, free market, not free market. And I think that entrepreneurs should not listen to those two polarized conversations and should rest in that gray area in the middle, learn to embrace the gray area and find ways to find solutions in unexpected ways that don't have to fall in either of those camps. And I think that's really more empowering for a more creative, free market, individualized way of thinking about it, instead of following these two tribes that can't find anything to agree on.
We are trying to remember what it means to be human, and that I think is something that the Antigua Forum and the Liberty Movement are also deeply engaged in.